Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Crystal, and thank you for the Augusta Museum of History for having a facility like this and doing programming like this, because I think that it's so important to share the history of our area accurately. Uh, I'm here with the golf club. My middle name is Galphin. My name is Milledge Murray. My parents gave me that name for many years. It's an unusual name. I always kind of knew that, well, if your name is Milledge, it's got to be connected to Augusta. The thing about having this golf club here, it's a wonderful putter. If you're playing golf, bullseye putter. It's a great walking stick that I need. And if I'm in this room, it's a wonderful pointer. Growing up, my dad sold green jackets at Cullum's and was very connected with some of the head pros at the Augusta National. And he was always known as Galphin. And my grandfather was known as, he was also a Galphin, but I knew him as Gaga. And I am now Gaga to my grandkids. And I'm primarily going to talk about three people, and maybe two more than the other one. But the first one is a guy by the name of George Galphin. And I just kind of share with you about him. He was an Indian trader. And when I say Indian trader, he traded with the Indians. And if you want to think about the Augusta area and the importance of the Augusta area, the Savannah River was an inland port. Native Americans lived here for years and years, and the Augusta Museum of History has done a wonderful job showcasing the Indian Native Americans in this area. And this was an important place for Indian traders to be able to do business with various Indian tribes, Native American tribes. The tribal activity of trading furs with the Indians long before George Galphin came along. But George Galphin was born in Ireland around 1710. He showed up in this area about 1740. So there's already been 50 years worth of Indian trading by the time he got here. And he was recruited to come to this area by a trading company called Brown, Ray and Company. And what that company was, Patrick Brown, John Ray, and George Galphin, who became a partner. They were the largest trading company in the Southeast, dealing with primarily deer hides. But they dealt with all kind of animal skins. And if you think about it, if Native Americans had to go to the ports in Savannah or Charleston, what are they going to go on a canoe or a flatboat or something? It would take them many, many days, probably well over 30 days to get there and get back. And how much deer hides could they bring, and how many European goods could they bring back? So it was just really, literally impossible. So this was kind of the perfect area. And George Galphin, when he came over to America, he landed in Charleston, and he realized that the Indian trading business, because there was so much activity with warehouses in Charleston, processing animal skins and the boats with the European goods. I mean, it was just, he just decided that this is what he wanted to do. And so he just got very interested in it, trying to learn the business and also learn about business. He learned that there was a kind of a custom, if you wanted to be successful as an Indian trader, that it was important to have a relationship with the daughter of an Indian chief or someone of prominence. So he ended up having a number of relations with Native Americans as well as slaves. An early relationship was a lady by the name of Nita Chucky, and what Nita Chucky did for him, and she was part of the Muskogee Creek Indian nation, was he was able to learn the language of the Indians, because if you're going to do business with someone, you've got to be able to communicate with them. Georgia did not get settled until Oglethorpe came over here around 1734, which was shortly around the period that George Galphin came. And George Galphin came over with his sister, and they ended up kind of going initially down into the Queensboro area, which is Louisville, Georgia, and they ended up establishing a trading post down there. But the state of Georgia did not allow for slaves. Oglethorpe decided that he did not want the people of Georgia owning slaves, because a slave would cost more than property, and so if they were, well, he just didn't believe in it anyway. So they would have to potentially mortgage their property to purchase a slave, and they just didn't want that. So when Brown Ray and Company recruited George Galphin to come to this area, he needed to settle somewhere in South Carolina, and he chose a spot about 15 miles east of Augusta, near Jackson, along a tributary of the Savannah River, and it was called Silver Bluff. Now, I'm sure everybody is aware of what Silver Bluff is and what it looked like. The history of the Silver Bluff area supposedly is the place where in the 1500s Hernando de Soto crossed the Savannah River at a place called Cotopaxi to come into Carolina. So and if you were to go to Silver Bluff today, which is the Audubon Nature Society, you've got these cliffs with clay cliffs, and it's beautiful. It really is beautiful, and it's got this silver crystal that shines, and it looks like it's silver, and that's how they came up with the name Silver Bluff. George Galphin created a wonderful large plantation out there, and as well as a large plantation in the Louisville area. And the way that the Indian traders did business is they would use pack horses. You might have 20 or 30 of them, and they would go into the tribal lands and do business with the Native Americans. What happened over time was that the Native Americans purchased more European goods than the furs and animal skins that they had, so they did create an indebtedness to the Indian traders. In studying George Galphin, and just kind of share with you my connection to George Galphin, is that George Galphin did not marry a white woman until he was 53 years old. And her name was Rachel Dupree, and she had two children. One was Martha Galphin, the other was Thomas Galphin. Martha was not able to have any children. Thomas Galphin was able to have a number of children, and his youngest son was named John Milledge Galphin. I guess I need to kind of share with you what we have over here, but I kind of wanted to quickly just connect me to who I'm talking about today. So Thomas Galphin's son was John Milledge Galphin. John Milledge Galphin's son was also Milledge Galphin. And Milledge Galphin's daughter was Willie Estelle Galphin, and Willie Estelle's son was Alexander Galphin Murray, and his son was Galphin Murray, and here I am. So, so that's the connection. To the far left over there is my grandfather. That's Willie Estelle in the middle. That's Milledge Galphin right there with the beard. Here I am with my Clemson sweatshirt. But the story about George Galphin and why he is so important to the Revolutionary era comes with the relationship that he had with a Muskogee Creek lady by the name of Matani. And Matani was from Coweta, and she bore him 3 children: John Galphin, George Galphin, and a daughter, Judith Galphin. And she was the daughter of a Creek chieftain. She understood the customs of the Creek nation, and she helped him and her children, George Galphin's children, helped with the running of the business for so many years. And George Galphin became really connected in a leadership role with the Creek Nation. He settled disputes. He was a good trader with them. He treated his plantation was a very good plantation. He treated with them fairly. Every year in May, he would have, it's kind of like a Fat Tuesday in New Orleans. He had a big event that took place at Silver Bluff, and they invited the various Indian tribes to come and stay several days. They partied. I mean, it was a big deal. In so many situations that that came up with disputes between tribes or whatever, they would go to George Galphin. I attended a lecture by a guy who wrote a book about George Galphin, and he did a great job. And he said that because of George Galphin's influence with primarily the Creek Nation, that he was kind of like the Daniel Boone of Georgia and South Carolina. In the French and Indian War, 1760, 1761, George Galphin played a major role in keeping the Creek Nation from fighting in that war. If you think about the Revolutionary War, the way that battles are fought in America, we know the way the British fight. And up north, it was a different type of fighting. But then you came down south, it was a different kind of fighting with the Patriots versus the British way of fighting. They would have a line of men, and then they would fall down, and another line of men. Indians. I mean, you do not want Indian warriors fighting on the side of the British or the whatever. You just didn't want them in the fight. So during the American Revolution, George Galphin was toward the end of the Indian trading period. He was made by the Continental Congress Indian agent for the southern region. And his role in that job was to make sure that the Indians, primarily the Creek Indians, would remain neutral in the fight. At the same time, the British had an agent by the name of John Stewart, who also knew the Indians very well. I mean, so it was this battle between these two men that had relationships with the Indian chiefs and whatever. And John Stewart reported directly to Lord Cornwallis. George Galphin reported directly to the leading generals, as well as Henry Lawrence, who was the vice president of the Continental Congress. The Continental Congress was the government of America. George Washington had to report to John Hancock during the American Revolution. In the papers of George Washington, as well as the historical papers of Henry Lawrence, there are statements that George Galphin, in his working with the Creek Indians to keep them from fighting for the battle, saved 10 to 20,000 warriors from fighting on the side of the Loyalists. And if you think about having that many Indians fighting, I mean, that could have changed what happened, but they didn't fight. And George Galphin had a large trading post at Silver Bluff, which is the Audubon Nature Society now. Had the first brick house in the area. He had a lot of quarters out there. But the main thing he had was a huge, huge storehouse of supplies. I heard another talk by someone that was sharing information about that period of time, and we're talking about the late 1760s and 1770s, and that was the Walmart of the area, because all of the locals would go get their supplies from the Galphin warehouse out there. So it was not so much the trading with the Indians at that time, it was trading with the people of the area. When William Bartram came through the area, he paid a visit to George Galphin's Silver Bluff plantation, and he wrote in his books that George Galphin had an amazing amount of influence with the Indians, and that there was no one that had more influence than him. But when the British came, and it was something like 150 something soldiers, they came and they captured Fort Galphin around 1780. We don't know exactly how George Galphin died, but he did die in 1780 out at the Silver Bluff plantation. The Patriots came in. They were able to recapture the area. They call Fort Galphin Fort Dreadnought, but it was primarily Fort Galphin. And a couple of years ago, they dedicated a marker to Fort Galphin, and with that complete story, and they had a wonderful dedication. I personally believe that markers are very important because, number one, a lot of research goes into a historical marker. It's going to last through time. It's placed at a place where history took place. And Alan and the Aiken County Historical Society have done a wonderful job with that. And I'm working on those types of projects in North Augusta and some in Augusta too. And the recapture of Fort Galphin took place with Light Horse Harry Lee, who's Robert E. Lee's father. And they were able to recapture Fort Galphin. And I'm going to start talking a little bit about, this is John Milledge and this is Martha Galphin. John Milledge is someone that we all know because we've got Milledge Road in Augusta. We've got the Sand Hills area up in Somerville. John Milledge is a very important person to share stories today. George Galphin in 1776 created a 23-page handwritten will in which he gave so much of his assets at that time, and they were substantial, to a lot of it's freeing slaves. And one of the wonderful things about the will was that he listed all of the slaves, which was over 100, by name, because a slave was property, but he listed them by name, and I thought that was very, very special. When he married at age 53, late John Milledge, and he had the two children, if he had a big estate, he had to have someone back in that time of Caucasian or that he could leave the estate to. So in the estate, he did leave his business grist mill, the plantation, Silver Bluff, all of that operation to his son Thomas. When the will was drawn up, Thomas was only 14 years old. This is in the museum downstairs in Augusta Story. This is Thomas Galphin's actual wallet. It was not donated by me, but it was donated by someone as part of the family. And that is a wonderful historic actual artifact that is on display in the Augusta Story right now. And I'm so thrilled that we're able to show it here. When Thomas Galphin, when George Galphin passed away, he was only 15 years old. So when George Galphin died in 1780, Martha was only like 16 years old, and he was like 17 years old, okay? When Martha was 22 years old, she marries a young man by the name of John Milledge. This is a picture of John Milledge, and this painting right here was painted by Gilbert Stuart. This is an obvious painting that was done at an older age. The painting, the best copy of the painting is hanging in the state capitol. John Milledge produced this locket of a young Martha Galphin who he had married. They were not able to have any children. And so I'm going to make a statement today that I absolutely feel is absolute truth, that when you read the will of John Milledge, he says that he raised Thomas Galphin's youngest son, John Milledge Galphin, from infancy. Why is that a possibility or a probability? John Milledge Galphin was born in 1794 when the American Revolution was over with. John Milledge, Thomas Galphin plantation, everybody ran away. He was saddled with so much financial problems. And in the will, Martha Galphin was given 1,000 acres of land in the Sand Hills area of Augusta. The property that Martha Galphin was given in the will was property that George Galphin had received as part of a British land grant in 1761. Where was that property located? And it was researched in a book that property covered par 3 golf course at Augusta National, a lot of Lake Olmsted, a lot of Milledge Road, some of the 11th hole. I mean, it was just a lot of property, probably a lot of the Augusta Country Club. Story of John Milledge. Why is he important? And he is very, very important. His family came to America on the boat with James Oglethorpe. His dad was given some high responsibilities, led a group called the Rangers, and did a lot of important things in the early years of the Georgia colony. Young John Milledge was born in like 1757. He was a very young man in Savannah. He ended up becoming an attorney. He was impressed everybody that was ever around him. He became the Attorney General of Georgia at a young age. He became close friends with a guy by the name of James Jackson, who was very important in Georgia's history. In the American Revolution, James Wright, who was kind of the governor or the head of Savannah, was a loyalist, which meant that he sided, when things were going on, he sided with the British Crown. It's kind of somewhat understandable how that happened because of the long relationship that Georgia had with the Crown, had with the ships that were coming from England, and the trading that was going on. I mean, it was just, but anyway, there was a large storehouse of gunpowder in Savannah. And up north, primarily we know the Battle of Bunker Hill, they were needing gunpowder to be able to fight against the British. And there was a group of 6 Liberty Boys who raided the storehouse in Savannah and were able to ship 600 pounds of gunpowder that were used in the Battle of Bunker Hill. John Milledge and James Jackson were part of that group. They also did something else that was kind of unheard of at the time. They arrested James Wright, who was the governor, and then they also had to, it probably saved his life, but they had to arrest the guy who taught them law, and but they probably saved his life by doing that. John Milledge later came and fought in the Battle of Augusta. He was listed as a Revolutionary hero. One thing that took place, it's kind of an interesting side note, is that several years after the Liberty Boy raid, James Jackson and John Milledge were kind of ragged, didn't have identification on them, and they were trying to, and they kind of crossed the Savannah River into South Carolina and got in with a group of South Carolina patriots, but they were unable to explain to the South Carolina patriots that they were not British spies. And they were scheduled to be hung. They convinced them, you've got to let us connect with the people that know who we are. And there's a gentleman by the name of Colonel Peter DeVoe who came and identified them and saved them from being hung. And that would have been a shame because these 2 men were very close friends and very important in the state of Georgia. And I got lucky on a document that I have hanging attached to the wall at Arts and Heritage Center in North Augusta. It's got Peter DeVoe's signature on it. It's also got George Walton's signature, and it also has William Stevens' signature. So these are 3 important men with the state of Georgia. A young John Milledge became an important guy in Georgia's history. In 1792, there were some issues with the residency of Anthony Wayne, and so he had to resign from Congress. So John Milledge became part of George Washington's Congress as a representative in the United States House of Representatives. And that was for a short period of time. But here we've got John Milledge in the United States House of Representatives under George Washington. Less than a year later, John Milledge is in the Congress of John Adams. I think that's fantastic. Now we've got a person in Georgia who's in George Washington's Congress, John Adams' Congress. Well, one thing that happened during his early time in the United States Congress, the federal government was trying to reduce the size of the military because they certainly were winning the war, but John Milledge felt like that we did not need to reduce the amount of military in Georgia because we still had a lot of Native American presence down here. We had Catawbas, Chickasaws, Creeks, Cherokees, and they were dealing with a lot of different states. So another thing that happened was just before John Milledge was elected governor of Georgia, one thing that John Milledge always believed in was education of the masses. What that meant was he knew that education was very important, and he could see Georgia as an important state to make sure that a lot of people from all over were educated. So he was part of a very small group that was given the assignment of finding an appropriate place to find institution for higher learning in the state of Georgia. And the state of Georgia didn't really have a lot of money at that time, but John Milledge was part of this group. They chose Athens, Georgia. John Milledge asked that he be allowed to purchase the land where the University of Georgia is located with his own money. He was granted that permission. He also named Athens after Plato's academy in Greece. And so we have Athens, Georgia, and a large main area in where the University of Georgia is located was land that was paid for and purchased by John Milledge. You have Milledge Avenue there. A lot of attributes were given to John Milledge as a result of him doing that and having that vision, which was the vision of education. That was the vision. Another issue was the state capitals of Georgia. And the early capitals of Georgia were first Savannah, and then later Augusta, and then it would rotate back and forth a little bit from Augusta, Savannah, whatever. And then later it became Louisville or Queensboro, and it was located within 20 miles of the Galphin trading post. But the issue with these three locations, even though they were the legitimate capitals of Georgia during that period, was that they were all located in the eastern area of the county, of the state. And so they needed a more centralized location. As a result of that, the state of Georgia, when John Milledge became governor in 1802, they created Milledgeville and named it in his honor. And Milledgeville became the state capital of Georgia for 64 years. It did not get removed as the capital of Georgia until the Civil War. And then after the Civil War, it became Atlanta. But for so many years, Milledgeville was the capital of the state of Georgia in honor of John Milledge. When all of this was happening, when he became governor and whatever, John Milledge decided to move to the property that was inherited by Martha. And so they moved to Augusta to live on the property that was granted to her in the will of George Galphin, which was 1,000 acres. In 1794, John Milledge ended up acquiring another 600 acres so that he created an estate right up on the hill area, and he named it Overton. And that's where he built his home, and this is a beautiful home. It's owned by Albert Gary now, and I had the opportunity to tour that home. It is lovely, and it is a high spot, beautiful area. Of course, back then, you didn't have as many trees that you have now, but it is a lovely, lovely area. Let me share with you about John Milledge. He dies in 1818. In 1812, after Martha Galphin passes away, he marries Anne Gresham Lamar. And Anne Gresham Lamar, they were able to bear 3 children. And then John Milledge dies on February the 9th, 1818. So he had 3 children. 2 of them died in early childhood. John Milledge Jr., who later became the librarian of the state of Georgia. He had a daughter by the name of Kate Habersham later, and she was an artist, and she painted, let's go back to that picture right here. She painted this picture. It's got to be 6 or 7 feet tall by 4. It's huge, and it's in a case, and it's been hanging in the John Milledge School. It's now in the Lamar Milledge School. And I went up there, and I was just floored by it. I had never seen it. But when you take a picture of it, it's under glass, and it had to be under glass. It's that old. And it had a glare, and I got Mark Alberton to go up there and use Photoshop and everything he does to create that picture right there. And I have not sent it to the Hargrett Library in Georgia yet, but it's going. The nice thing about this is it's an earlier picture of John Milledge. And I just think that there needs to be another good photograph of John Milledge. So many people don't know what he looked like. John Milledge was governor of the state of Georgia. One of the primary roles that he had was to come up with a proper state lottery system for getting rid of all of the lands in the state of Georgia to help repay the debts of the American Revolution. And I was able to acquire a document, and I had it archivally framed, and I just have it at my house. And this right here is a seal of the state of Georgia, and that's the original autograph of John Milledge. And this right over here, and I had breakfast with Brian Halterman this morning, and he shared with me something that just perked my interest, that this seal has got a picture of a building. And where is that building located? Because the seal was created in 1799, and I just think that, well, where's that building? You know, I think that's interesting. But the wonderful thing about this document is John Milledge, as the governor of Georgia, has sold 400 acres of land in Jefferson County to a John Murray. So I got my name on it. But it's a precious document to me. This book right here is a fabulous, fabulous book. I've only seen 3 of them, and it was done by Harriet Milledge Sally in 1952, and it's got all of these letters in there, correspondence. And to share with you more about John Milledge, while he was governor of Georgia, one thing that he was able to do, because he knew the inner workings of the federal government, Congress, he was able to make sure that the relationship between the state of Georgia and the federal government was good. And he worked to do that, and Georgia had really good relations with the state of Georgia while he was governor. And he was governor for 1 term. They helped bring in the lands west of the Chattahoochee River during his administration. He was very organized, was a very, very good governor. Then after his term, his close friend, James Jackson, who was a United States Senator, passed away, and he was asked to serve out a pretty full term in the United States Senate under Thomas Jefferson. So you've got a man who was in Washington's Congress, Adams' Congress, Jefferson's Congress. In Jefferson's Congress, he was president pro tem of the Senate, the top job. And he had a very close relationship with Thomas Jefferson because they were both into agronomy, horticulture, plants, and they would correspond back and forth. And it was a very, very solid relationship. Okay.
Does anybody have a question for Milledge?
Yes.
Go ahead, real quick.
First of all, I just want to say that we're lucky to have Milledge in our community. He's so passionate about local history, but even better, he shares local history, not just by speaking, but all these documents and photographs he shares with other people who are passionate about history. And that's rare. So we really
thank you so much. If we don't do it, it will die. You can't let history die.
Milledge, the only thing you haven't mentioned is, what's your connection to John Milledge?
I didn't, and I'm surprised I didn't do that. John Milledge adopted my grandfather and raised him as his son. And in his will, it says, I raised my son John Milledge Jr., his entire first page of his will is related to John Milledge Galphin, who he sent to medical school. And he became a doctor on the Hill. After that, he married a lady from Beach Island, purchased the Red Cliff property, lived out there for 30 years, sold the property to James Hammond. While he was there, he was James Hammond's doctor. He was also Anne Gresham Lamar's doctor. This book over here has so many people in it from Augusta that they were medical doctor for. Sent him to the medical school of Pennsylvania. I've got his medical books. He commissioned this painting right here. Dr. John Milledge Galphin was the physician in Beach Island, also at the Arsenal. The Murray side of me was James Henry Murray, who was the first doctor in Hamburg. So I'm connected to two doctors.
Thank you.